Okay, everyone. So it looks like we've got quite a few people in the room. So thank you, Sarah, for coming to deliver this talk today on transforming gender norms through sport participation. And I'm super excited to hear about your experience in Nepal. It's one country that I really want to go to. So looking forward to it. I'll hand it over to you and you can kick off and share your slides if you've got any.
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, thank you for the welcome and also for inviting me to talk with you guys. I'll just get my slides up and then we can get started. So hopefully you can all see my main slide there now. So yeah, my name's Sara Begg. I'm a PhD student at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, but I, like many of you, I'm a coach first, really. Started off as a sort of community cricket coach in East London, pounding the tarmac, and I've somehow ended up in Nepal, but it's there's a lot of commonalities actually in that journey, and I think you'll recognise quite a lot of the things that come up here in this research that you might find useful to apply to your own practice and studies. So if anything captures the sort of atmosphere at the start of the project that we worked on here, it's this quote: "If girls play sport, when do they learn to cook food?" And that pretty much summarises the experience of adolescent girls who are trying to take part in sport in Nepal. Let me tell you first a little bit about Sanu Rajbanshi. So Sanu is a cricket player from Morang district, which is in Koshi province, and she's an exceptional cricketer. A couple of years ago, she was selected to play for Nepal under-19s and did really well there. She lives in a village just outside Biratnagar and cycles 40 minutes to the Biratnagar Cricket Academy every evening to hone her cricket skills. On that journey, she's accompanied by a sort of peloton of other girls from her village, who between them form the core of the Morang district team. So in this talk, I'll be sharing the phase 1 findings from a youth participatory action research study that ultimately aims to make Sanu and the Morang girls' story a bit more everyday in Nepal. So let's have a little quick look at the overview and then we'll get started properly. There we go. So I'm just going to give you a bit of background. The Nepal context might be a bit unfamiliar to a few of us, so a bit on the context as well. I'll share a bit about the methods that we've used in this research, the sort of participatory play-based approach, some of the results, and in particular then the next steps. I think a lot of this will be probably the most relevant part for you guys as a group. So the project background: Nepal's a big country and it's pretty diverse in its geography. Most of you will probably imagine mountains, prayer flags, temples, that kind of thing. But actually, the band across the bottom is called Terai, the Terai region. And it's got a lot more cultural sort of similarity to northern India. It's very hot, very flat, perfect for cricket, really. The project is called Cricket for Equality, and the organisations that have been involved in implementing that project are a blend of Nepali organisations, so those are the ones on the left. The Nepal Cricket Foundation is not the Cricket Association of Nepal, so it's a local NGO looking at trying to increase participation in cricket, local cricket association, and a youth development and WASH organisation, so water and sanitation organisation. Then on the right-hand side, you've got various UK-based organisations and Save the Children, which is an international NGO looking at child's rights. So the project applies what's called a youth participatory action research approach, which is a bit of a mouthful. Essentially what that means is that it's youth-led inquiry, whereby as a group, the youth researchers and then senior researchers, adult researchers, start off by looking at what might be an issue in the community, reflecting on, gathering information about that from their peers, from other people in the community, reflecting on that research that they've undertaken, creating a plan of action and implementing that action plan, then reviewing the impact of that, and the cycle then continues. One of the key challenges with youth participatory action research is that historically, the at what, so the thing that we're looking at is often defined by external agencies, people who are coming into the space. But in this project, we actually set out to say, right, adolescent girls in this region, what do you want to look at? What are the things that you want to change in or through sport? So we created what we called the Cricket Changemakers. So these were the youth action research groups. In the Morang district, they were a little bit younger and slightly fewer of them. In Satri, a little bit older and a few more of them. But the main thing was they were all drawn from the public schools in those local regions. So in this context, public means government schools, not private schools. And the girls are predominantly from Terai, Janajati and Madesh Dalit communities. So these are pretty marginalised, low status groups in Nepal. After sort of some initial workshops with those groups, we kind of came to the conclusion that the thing that we wanted to look at really was girls' participation in sports, and use that as a bit of a lens to understand the challenges that they face more broadly in society. And the girls themselves defined these 3 research questions. So the first was, what stops girls from playing sport? The second is what helps girls to play, and then what happens when girls play. So we started to define these play-based participatory research tools. And I'll show you a picture of the kind of activity and explain it to you. But as part of that, if you can drop in the chat box now your response to the question, what do you think stops girls playing sport in your own context? For us, the activity worked by students or these players writing on the whiteboards or on these flashcards what stops girls playing sport, and then we threw tennis balls at them to try to knock them out of their community. So throw your ideas in now, because we'll talk about some of the findings and see if there's any similarities based on your perspectives here. Can keep working on that over the next few, because I'll just talk through a bit more on the methods. So we did that with 15 groups from 8 schools. We had 153 participants altogether, a mix of boys and girls, aged 13 to 19. And these were all facilitated by those youth researchers. So they organised these activities and games with their peers. And we then actually worked together to analyse those results. So sort of iterative process where we took all the words that had been written down, organised them into groups as a kind of thematic analysis. So here they are, things that stop girls playing sport, or what happens when Terai girls play. So this is what we're looking at. These were the key results. And if I were to summarise it, girls experience loads of barriers on every step of their journey as players in Nepal. And most of those are rooted in what we call restrictive gender norms and gender roles. But we did also find that girls who do play challenge and transform these roles. And I can see already the sort of words coming up from your responses here around role models being something that really did correlate and came out of our research as well. So I'll tell you about Ishq first. So Ishq is this character on the left. She was created by the Cricket Changemakers from Morang to help share our research findings. So Ishq means love in Hindi, actually, not even in Nepali. But these girls watch so many Bollywood movies that that might account for why she's called Ishq. So Ishq faces troubles or barriers due to her gender before she's even left the house. So gender roles mean that girls are expected to stay at home and help with household tasks, while boys are free to play sports or engage in other activities. So not only are girls expected to do a disproportionate amount of the household work, but this is also tied up in their expectations for their future lives post-marriage. It's all about who you're going to marry and how are you going to live as a married woman after that life stage. In Satri in particular, girls' participation in sports is seen as a factor that would stop girls from getting married, so like risk of injury or reducing their desirability, while getting married was also a factor in the girls who did play sport ending their involvement as they came under the influence of their husband's family. So even if their mums, their dads had been supportive of them playing sports, when they got married, if their husband's family didn't approve, that was the end of it. And this is a context where girls might get as married as young as 16. Gender norms, or as she travels to the ground rather, Ishq faces uncomfortable comments from the community. So those are directed both at her and her family, questioning the propriety of her girls moving about independently and being away from the home when she should be attending to household tasks. So this sort of gossip and backbiting affects girls both directly, so particularly when they're traveling alone, but also affects their parents, because they're then reticent to allow their girls to leave the house and subject their family to this negative scrutiny from the wider community, kind of calls into question the girl's purity and whether or not the family are doing a good job of raising her as a good, in inverted commas, girl. So when she gets to the ground, Ishq faces Eve teasing, which is public sexual harassment, and bullying by boys. So girls talked about boys staring, commenting on their bodies, laughing at them when they get injured or make mistakes, and telling her she'd be at home, that cricket is for boys only. In extreme cases, boys would physically assault girls. Not only is this behavior made permissible by gender norms, it actually also reinforces again those restrictions put onto girls by their families as they seek to protect their girls and their family's reputation from harm. And then as she heads home, she's racing against the sunset. And this is to avoid men in the street. So she and her parents fear sexual assault and falling victim to traffickers who will spirit girls away over the border to India. While the threat of this violence is certainly real, it's actually pretty small. But the effect of the fear of this violence is actually a sort of striking finding. It creates further limitations on girls. So even the most permissive parents expect girls to be home after the sun starts to drop below the horizon. So the question is sort of how can we make Ishq's journey more like Sanu's? One of the key things that we found was that pride was a concept that tied individual interpersonal relationships, the community and the wider society together. So creating pride strengthened girls' self-image and motivated other girls, but it was also a means by which perspectives on girls' capabilities could be changed amongst boys, and which gave parents, in inverted commas, permission to give girls more freedom as the wider community grew more accepting of girls participating in sport. Ultimately, this was tied up in the concept of national pride and making Nepal proud. So it became a question of like, so what and what next? So for those who are maybe less familiar with social norms, Sasaginheis is like the key thinkers around social norms at the minute, and I'd recommend dipping into that if you're interested in the concepts. But social norms interventions often actually ignore protective norms and attitudes and really just focus on trying to introduce new norms. But through participatory action research, like what we did, you can identify and strengthen positive norms within the community value system. And we feel that we've identified pride as a positive norm that can be strengthened in this context. To achieve this, I worked with those cricket change makers to then design an intervention that aimed to cause action at 3 levels of the socio-ecological model. So that's sort of thinking about, you're not just working at the individual level, you're also trying to make change at the interpersonal level. So the relationship between parents and the girls and their male and female peers, with teachers and so on at the community level. So that means community sports clubs, schools, other sort of community institutions. And then the socio-ecological model also includes the societal level, but that's actually quite challenging to create change in these kind of sort of small scale projects. So what did we aim to do? So the first was build girls' confidence through sport. And so we modified the sort of 5 C's of positive youth development to create a 6 C's of positive youth development through cricket. And those 6 C's were connection, confidence, competence, character, creativity, and caring. So the curriculum, I guess, that we co-created and then trained older female peer leaders to implement, and also male and female community coaches to implement. And some key questions maybe for you to reflect on is how can coaches foster pride and positive self-identity in their athletes? And how can coaches create an environment conducive to mental well-being? One of the key things for this intervention was that, or activity, was that it was drawn, or it was built on beliefs about coaching that were prevalent within that coaching community in Nepal. So there's a lot of focus on discipline, on structure. And so rather than trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, we need to completely rethink how we're coaching and go with this much more sort of maybe implicit style of coaching or whatever, we've kind of tried to keep a lot of the values that were well established amongst the coaching community there, and added additional coaching values to try to make this a more palatable and I guess something that's more taken up by the coaching community. The second activity was to involve and build gender awareness in boys. And so what we did is create a series of activities and games that were play-based, but that created dialogue about gender norms and how they negatively affect both boys and girls, but also what their roles can be in positively transforming those norms. And interestingly, so we sort of implemented that with teachers so that they could support coaches delivering it, and it's been implemented in schools. But the cricket change makers themselves have now said, actually, we want to organise activities with our parents to get them to be involved in these activities as well. And sort of one of the key things about that sort of piece of work is the role of role models in demonstrating these sort of gender norm transforming behaviours. And Dharmendra Chowdhury was sort of a key, I guess, figure in inspiring this. So he was the only person who was coaching girls before this project started. This is our coach Dharmendra. He is alone in coaching girls. But we're starting to understand that the role of coaches in transforming restrictive gender norms is really significant. And like I say, we created this playbook with practical application actions for coaches at these different levels. And then the last one is for girls' sport to be more visible in the community. And this was simply a case of organising activities. So I'm going to show you a quick video and hope that the sound works to just show sort of where we started, and well, not really where we started, but where we ended up to just within, this was within 3 months of the action phase starting. So hopefully this will play. Let's go.
Ready?
There's been plenty more that's gone on since. If you want to see a few more videos of things that the project's been up to, you can go to Cricket Changemakers on YouTube. But I hope this has been interesting. I want to give a shout out to all of the Cricket Changemakers who are co-authors on this piece of work. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions that come out of that presentation.
Any questions, anyone, before I jump in? So I've got a question there. In terms of that intervention, what do you think was like the most effective part of it?
So interestingly, more than anything, the 6 C's. So just trying, I'll go back to it just to sort of highlight the sort of key themes in it. But having a really sort of clear conversations about these kind of values in both with the coaches, but then also actually making them quite explicit in sessions. And because the sessions were starting to become mixed gender, that meant that the sort of caring connection part of that in particular was creating space for dialogue between boys and girls that built the sort of kind of respect and supportive environment. So now you'll see a lot of the boys who are involved in the session actually helping out new players coming in, boys and girls, creating a sort of community environment, I suppose, that's much more supportive. And from there, the other things have grown. That being said, to get kids into the community session in the first place, competition. So having the opportunity to get a shirt and be proud of my achievements in that, oh, I've been asked to play for the school team, has meant that those girls who would just participate, I mean, it's still a huge thing for them to be participating in a school team, for them to then start coming regularly to the community session. That's been a key driver for that. And, you know, it's great because you can track which ones have come from that because they all turn up in the competition T-shirts. So
that's cool.
Very easy to monitor.
Nice. Any other questions from anyone?
Could I just ask something, Sarah? You know, where did you experience most resistance to this program? Because you did mention some of the cultural kind of views, you know, things about marriage and time and cooking and everything.
Yeah.
And how did you overcome those, if you did?
Yeah. So the sort of key barriers or the key stakeholders who continue to be the source of greatest resistance are still parents. And that's actually an ongoing piece for us. So one of the key parts of it is sort of it's like a referral thing of, if one girl is attending regularly, their parents then will talk to other people's parents and say, oh, actually, this has been a really good thing for my daughter. You know, she's a source of pride for our family, and you know, you should let your daughter participate. But as I said, the change makers themselves have now got plans in place to do a more in-depth piece around gender sensitization and understanding, helping parents to understand the impact of gender norms and what actually gender norms are, because most of their parents are non-literate, so they can't read, or they read very little, so their exposure to these kind of conversations is actually pretty minimal. And so the change makers believe that having a more sort of play-based interactive way of starting those conversations, even with parents, will accelerate the process that's happening just through peer-to-peer, parent-to-parent idea diffusion that we see otherwise in terms of transforming those ideas. The other big challenge is some male teachers, unfortunately. And again, it's often about getting them into a training environment with teachers who are on board with the idea to kind of, with norm transformation, often it's basically like, what do other people think is normal? And so if you're in an environment with other people who are maybe challenging your perspectives, that's a key mechanism for transforming norms.
Yeah, great. It does sound like it's a transformative thing of cultural practices and views and beliefs that you're chipping away at through lots of different ways and lots of different levels, actually.
Exactly. And that's the key thing, is the different levels. If it was just about, empowering girls, there's only so much girls can do in an environment that is attempting to keep them into certain roles, basically.
Great. Thanks.
No problem.
Thanks very much for that talk. That's super interesting. If you ever need anybody to go to Nepal, let me know.
You're always welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I'll pass over